Boys and gents, and welcome to CG Reaction. And this is Byzantium 2 Rise of Justinian, Justinian Part 1 by the channel Maltheus. So, this is another channel that is like Doherty, who makes videos like Unbiased History about Byzantium. Doherty released his first video of Byzantium just a few days ago. This is a second video from Maltheus about Byzantium. First video was really good. I really like that. People are saying that this second video is even better than Doherty's. I mean, you have to understand, Doherty makes, let's just unbiased history. So, he really, stretches all facts and sides of it. He really goes too biased towards one side. So, obviously, Doherty's video is going to be a bit too much. Maltheus also here and there talks like Doherty, but he doesn't go that biased towards anything. So Doherty is mostly satirical side of it is funny, but apparently people lots of people didn't like that video compared to Maltheus's, and people are saying that this video also increased in quality. I thought first video was already great, so this raised in quality, so it must be really good. And the first video was so good. I'm like, this guy only has 3,000 subscribers. I think that's really underrated. I think he should have really high subscriber by now. Only thing I can think of is YouTube algorithm is not giving him the spotlight that he deserves. So I hope anybody who's watching this video, and if you haven't seen this channel, if you haven't seen this video and you like this, just go to the channel and subscribe. I'll put the link in the description about the original video. Go there and subscribe to it. This guy really deserves it. He just has 3,000 subscribers. So yeah, this was the Byzantium to Rise of Justinian. Justinian was a really key figure. I know that. I don't know much about Byzantium. I didn't know much about Rome either. But very few figures that I know about Justinian, I know because of most of his laws. He wrote a lot of laws that even get carried out today in lots of places, almost everywhere. Lots of laws are just there because Justinian thought of it. So that's really important history right there. So let's watch it. I don't understand is this Maltheus guy know Doherty? Did they work together in the unbiased Rome thing and now they split or something? Because he's really following Doherty's technique a lot. Even the intros with the type of music he's using, that really feels like Doherty. I mean, if you show this video to someone and don't tell them what the channel is, they would think that this is Doherty's video.
Emperor Justinian, known to history as one of the greatest men this world has ever seen. His story begins in the little village of Tauresium, and he was just a boy when he came to Constantinople at the behest of his uncle, Justin. There he received his education, growing up to be a man of high culture and intellect. By the time of Anastasius' death, he had climbed the ladder to become an officer in one of the palace regiments. By now it seems that Justin had formally adopted him as his son.
The name Justin, isn't it surprising that Byzantine Empire is one of the biggest emperors of all time is Justinian, or before that it was Justin. And in Canada, when Justin Trudeau was up for election, people like, the opposing party was constantly emphasizing on the name Justin, like it's not somebody who's fit to, I guess, lead a country, somebody named Justin. Yet in the time of Byzantium time, Romans time, Justin was supposedly, emperor name.
Son, upon which Petrus Sabatius now assumed the name Justinianus, by which he would be known to history. In the year 518, the newly crowned Emperor Justin elevated his nephew to the rank of patrician and appointed him to a position in the imperial court, from which he would gain access to the highest circles of power. It is at this moment that Justinian's long career began, because from here on out, Justin was content with focusing on his duties as emperor, while Justinian would engineer his uncle's activities and keep him on the throne. Moreover, this was when he began planning for his own grander ideas. Starting with that usurper of Italian, Justinian lured him in with riches and ranks, only to have him killed when he least expected. Next, on to church matters. Almost 40 years before, the church in Constantinople and Rome had split when the Pope excommunicated the Patriarch. To Justinian, this was a disgrace to him and what he longed for the most. One God, one church, and one empire. So they exchanged a few letters with the Pope, and sure enough, mended the schism between East and West. They also posthumously cucked a whole string of heretics by anathemizing them. 2 years later, there came another turning point in Justinian's life. He met his future wife, Theodora. To put it very mildly, Theodora was far from an ideal match. For starters, her family came from the lowest dregs of society. That alone should be enough to drop her from polite society, but boy was that just the tip of the iceberg. See, she was an actress, and aside from performing on stage, she allegedly did other things. It was probably all slander though. Anyhow, it wouldn't.
Oh, okay. So she wasn't really a prostitute, was he? Apparently, it was just a rumor. In Doherty's video, obviously, he just said that she was one. Obviously, that's a biased view and really not true view. I mean, Doherty's videos, when you see it, lots of things are completely false, but that's the way he intended it to, because it's funny somehow. So yeah, apparently she wasn't a prostitute.
Wouldn't be the case much longer, as during a trip to and from North Africa, she had undergone some sort of religious experience, because when she returned to Constantinople, she was a changed woman. One thing that did not change, though, was her unwavering support for the Blues and hatred for the Greens. If you'll recall from the last episode, the Blues and Greens were chariot racing teams, but also proto-political parties. Sure enough, Justinian also favored the Blues. In fact, he sometimes used his clout to protect the Blues from legal trouble from time to time. And so, through the Blue faction, Justinian and Theodora met. Theodora was beautiful and intelligent as ever, with the wisdom and maturity that she lacked as a thought earlier on in life. They would have just gotten married had some crusty old aristocrats not spurred out about ma patrician and ma actress match. Especially Justinian's aunt, the empress, who ironically enough also rose from the theater to the palace. Women, am I right? They cited some law that forbade patricians
Ah, well, somebody didn't go away. You hypocrite! You did the same thing. Why are you so annoyed?
to marry low classes, but Justinian just changed the law after the old empress died and carried on with the marriage. The most iconic power couple in history has just begun. At the same time, disturbing reports arrived from some desert shit.
I mean, when you're about to get married to the powerful guy, of course, technicalities are not going to matter. He's just like, I'm going to change the technicalities.
Held down south, in the Himyarite kingdom. Their new king, Yusuf Dunawas, was a convert to Judaism, and he began slaughtering Christians to fuel his Kabbalah black magic and to sate his demonic bloodlust. The word of the genocide spread across the Roman and Persian realms, and refugees who reached Constantinople begged the emperor to avenge the slain martyrs. Recognizing his role as defender of all Christians, Justin called upon a legendary based black man in Ethiopia. King Caleb of Aksum immediately agreed to destroy this terror.
Oh my god, this is so good. This is so good. I love this.
5 years of bloody warfare, the monstrous Dunuwas was finally defeated. He rode his horse into the sea, focusing all of his might to
Horse be like, man, you wanna kill yourself? Just jump in the sea by yourself. Why you have to go with me? Oh my God, this is just 6 minutes in this video, and I can already see the quality of this. This is so good, man. The timing to use music, he already used first the intro and here. It's really good, man. This is really good.
conjure up an ancient Jewish ritual, beginning a 100-year summoning spell. He cursed the Arabian sands with his last dying breath. And that curse will manifest itself. Just you wait. Years later, Caleb would pack his diadem and send it off to Jerusalem, then to live out the rest of his life in a monastery, making it illegal for anyone except for priests and monks to speak to him. Truly, the basest of all black men. He will be forever immortalized as Saint Elizabeth in the church. We now travel to a kingdom tucked away in the Caucasus Mountains, the Georgian kingdom of Lazika. This was a place long subjugated by Persia, and its new king, Tsoth, recognized the truth of Christianity and decided to free his people. No longer would they be puppets to the Shah. Tsoth raced to meet Justinian in Constantinople, where he was given a proper baptism and crowned king. He then returned to spread the light to the rest of his people. Kavad is just seething and threatens Justin with a war. His reply? It is impossible to prevent someone who wishes to enter a better way from knowing the one true God. And Kavad fucked right off. Well, kinda sorta. Using some autistic, diplomatic, and semantic bullshit to start complaining, Kavad just starts chimping out. And then when the twin Georgian kingdom, Iberia, tried to copy Tsoth, Kavad got even more butthurt. He figured that since Justin was by now a very old man, and once Justin finally kicked the bucket, the political instability would create the perfect time to strike. Easy, right? And that brings us to another war with Persia. Conjuring up the vilest black magic from the darkest depths of his realm, the eternally seething Kavad summoned a massive earthquake, utterly destroying the glorious city of Antioch. Some 250,000 innocent civilians were killed in a pathetic episode of Persian seeth magic. Nearby Caesarea and other villages were also destroyed. At just the right moment, though, the Iberians revolted and threw out their despotic Persian overlords. Justinian ordered a preemptive raid into Georgia to secure the Caucasus, while Justin sent a shit ton of Anastasius' treasury money to rebuild Antioch, innovating sturdier foundations to cuck any future Persian subversive magic and providing charity to the
This is basically Eastern Roman Empire, isn't it? Look at this. The city was destroyed. They're like, I'm gonna throw money at it and build it again, and they did. This is ridiculous.
survivors. The same was offered to nearby Caesarea, and the grateful civilians renamed the city Justinopolis in his honor. They then prepared to end Persian rule over the Caucasus once and for all. However, as they began preparations, Justin realized his time was at an end. Having dutifully served the empire, God called upon him to leave this mortal realm, both knowing that an even greater man's time had finally come. Justin quickly elevated Justinian to Augustus and slowly succumbed to the call from above after a glorious 9-year reign. Now the sole emperor, the young Justinian was now poised to unleash his dream of the Renovatio Imperii Romanorum, the restoration of the Roman Empire. It had been his lifelong aspiration, the one he set his heart upon at a very young age. Now it was finally in his reach. But first, he had to deal with a catastrophe unfolding in the east. First, the Persians invaded Christian Iberia, slaughtering innocent civilians and clearing a path towards Lazika. Tsoth fought alongside nearby Romans and repelled the Persians. Realizing his own evil was not great enough to overcome the Romans, Kavad conjured up an agent of the devil to rise from the underworld. Al-Mundir, king of the Lakhmids, a pagan Arab tribe which was a puppet of the Sassanids. The hordes of Al-Mundir descended upon Syria, destroying all signs of civilization in their wake. Justinian responded quickly, sending a large force to protect Antioch. But little did Justinian know, Al-Mundir had already secured what he truly desired. Having captured hundreds of nuns, he burnt them alive, all to satisfy his demonic gods and absorbing the dark energy released. Horrified,
Man, he sounds more and more like Doherty now with all this demonic talk. Oh my god, he burned nuns alive. Ugh. I knew it from the start. This Byzantine Empire is gonna revolve around religious things a lot.
Justinian countered with calling upon a ruler who emerged as a foil to Al-Mundir. King Al-Harith of the Christian Arab Ghassanid kingdom accepted his mandate and struck deep into Lakhmid territory, decisively defeating them. During his campaign, he was aided by one brilliant Roman general by the name of Flavius Belisarius. At the same time in Constantinople, a horrifying aura spread through the city. It emanated from the dispossessed son of the king of the Gepids, another Germanic tribe beyond the Danube. It said that his Hunnic half descended from Attila himself. This abomination approached Justinian, offering him his allegiance. Before Justinian accepted, he converted him and bound Mundus to the cause of the empire. He would soon be needed, for now we return to our regularly scheduled Danube invasion. Some Bulgars and Slavs started raiding into the Balkans. Yep, totally surprising. Mundus was tested here when he was appointed Magister Militum of Illyria and given an army to push back the invaders. Rapidly defeating and capturing the Bulgar king in battle, Mundus then crossed the Danube and ravaged the barbarian squatter settlements. They then groveled at Mundus' feet for peace. They'll be back though, they never learn. Back to the east, Kavad wasn't finished. Oh no, he summoned yet another earthquake to destroy Antioch once and for all. But with the city's new sturdy
Okay. Did earthquake really destroy the city, or is he just, using just, stupid, unbiased view, I guess? Earthquake, I mean, if earthquake is the issue, like that region was unstable, if that's the case. Building a city over and over again is not going to solve things.
foundations which Justin had built, he cucked Kavad even in death. His mortal body now too weakened by the exercise of so many demonic summoning rituals, Kavad used the last of his dark energy to bind a certain group of Jewish people to his cause, the Samaritans. They answered the call from Kavad, and under a messianic leader briefly took over all of Samaria, slaughtering every Christian there, until the Romans, led by our greatest ally Al-Harith, put them down ruthlessly and destroyed their sacred altar upon some random hill that they held to be the most sacred place in the world. 100,000 Samaritans were killed in the aftermath. And unlike the Jews from the Bar Kokhba revolt 400 years earlier, the Samaritans never recovered from this, and they've been a fringe minority in Samaria ever since. Kavad used this as a distraction to muster up a huge
Swear to God, Jews has been killed so much. It's no wonder there are literally not like what 15 million Jews are only left in the world. I mean, that's just ridiculous. How many of them been killed? Every single time I go to, whether it's Roman time, this Byzantian time, just a century or two ago, Egyptian time, all those times, Jews constantly getting killed in masses.
Huge army of 50,000, marching his horde westwards. Al-Harith raced to meet up with Belisarius as the horde descended upon that city that Anastasis had built previously, the fortress of Dara. Joining them would be Belisarius' new secretary, Procopius. Belisarius realized the city could not withstand a siege of such a magnitude. Instead, his men would stand their ground and fight outside of the walls like true men. He constructed 3 lines of trenches in a box formation, center trench drawn back. His absolute dogshit levied 10,000 light infantry were probably going to break at the first sign of trouble, so he held them back behind the center trench. Most of these troops were fresh recruits he got along the way from the countryside, so some of them were given basic archery training to compensate for the lack of archers. Behind them was 1,500 elite Bucellari cavalry in reserve for a decisive strike. Belisarius subjugated a force of 1,200 Huns, now serving him as light cavalry. They were tucked away in the mouth of the trench formation. Behind the trenches on the right and left were the main force, 15,000 Roman cavalry, but they were of pretty questionable quality. Finally, on the left, hidden away in the hillside, was his force of a few hundred Hyperborean Heruli cavalry. Facing Belisarius was a Persian horde 2 times bigger than his, outnumbering him by 25,000. Among the Persians were the 10,000 Immortals, armored heavy lancers, the most powerful agents of the underworld and the pride of Persia's armies. Their total of 20,000 heavy cavalry acted as cataphracts and dealt the most devastating frontal charges of the time. With the Romans entrenched, the Persians made their first move. Thousands of heavy cavalry crashed into the Roman left. Belisarius had his cavalry feign a retreat until missile troops on the city
I'm loving this, but this is more like, Dovehati merged with Epic History TV or something. This is awesome.
walls, and his archers began to rain down hell against them. The Persians then fled back to their lines in horror. Now realizing the sheer power level of Belisarius, the Persians awaited for reinforcements. In the meantime, a massive Persian champion issued a challenge for single combat, taunting the Roman troops. A mere wrestling coach named Andreas accepted this challenge. He walked up and kinda just fucking killed the best warrior the Persian horde had to offer within a few seconds. The Romans cheered for their champion, but as he was walking back, another enraged demon warrior surged forward to slay Andreas. Andreas again executed the Persian challenger effortlessly, his triumph on display for all to see that day. The next day, thousands of Persian...
Oh my god, that was so good. Oh my god, where the hell did this come from, man? His animation quality is just awesome now, man.
Warriors streamed in. The Persian general mockingly ordered Belisarius to draw him up a bath in Dara, as he would want to relax after his glorious victory. The battle commenced with Persian archers marching forward. However, the wind started to blow against the Persians, rendering their arrow fire worthless. Their cavalry charged towards both sides of the Roman lines, seeking to break through and envelop the center. Heavy cavalry assaulted the left, while the Immortals descended upon the right. As the Persians broke through the Roman left, Belisarius' hidden Heruli cavalry fell upon the bewildered Persians. Simultaneously, half of his Huns in the center jumped onto their other side through a narrow gap in the trenches. Surrounded on three sides, the Persians were butchered by the thousands. On the right, the Immortals burst through.
As far as we know, good tactics always overcomes any power and number of the army, I guess.
The Roman lines. The remaining Huns flanked them too, but the Immortals were too powerful against Hunnic light cavalry. At just the moment when some of his troops were at their breaking points, Belisarius personally led his last reserves, the mighty Bucellari, straight into the melee. The Immortals were relentlessly massacred by the thousands, but continued their advance. Their bloodlust was insatiable. The Bucellari hacked their way through the Persian rear, while the Huns and the Heruli, now done with annihilating the left side, came around and collapsed on the Immortals. Surrounded on all sides, the Immortals were completely obliterated. The surviving Persian cavalry abandoned their infantry in cowardice, leaving them to be massacred by Belisarius. But he opted not to risk it. At the same time in Armenia, a Roman force also defeated a much larger Persian foe at the Battle of Satala. These battles were crushing victories for the Romans, turning the tide of the war. Belisarius returned to Constantinople, a hero in the east, and Mundus, a hero in the west. As for Kavad, shortly after one of his commanders had a Pyrrhic victory at Callinicum against the Romans, he died seething over his crushing defeats. His essence transferred to the only being capable of succeeding him, the cruelest of all his demon spawn, Khosrow. If Khosrow had his way, he would have relentlessly continued in his father's footsteps, leaving a path of death and destruction in his wake. Khosrow asked for peace, so he can concentrate on murdering his own family and killing his own countrymen. Justinian had grander plans and was more than happy to let Persians kill Persians, so a treaty was signed.
Basically what happened was, after so many tries the Sassanid did against the Romans and now Byzantians, they're like, you know what, this can't be done. So let's just call for peace and leave it for now.
With Lazica coming under Roman control and Iberia remaining under Sassanid control. Justinian even paid 11,000 pounds of gold to Khosrow as a contribution to his defense of the Caucasus against God knows whatever lies beyond. You see, this entire time all this shit was going down in the frontiers, not only was Justinian sending out military orders like crazy, but he was also busy reforming the very foundations of the empire itself. Immediately upon him becoming emperor, he sought to reform the bureaucracy in the state, though not necessarily like how Constantine or Diocletian did. Instead of structural changes, he would make the bureaucracy work more efficiently by rooting out corruption and improving tax collection. Demonstrating his knack for seeing talent, Justinian surrounded himself with the best and the brightest, among them John the Cappadocian, a ruthless and high-handed administrator. John purged the government of corrupt bureaucrats and sycophants. He then turned his gaze to the decadent rich assholes who had long leeched off the success of the empire for their own materialistic gain. John confiscated the properties of corrupt plutocrats and forced others to finally respect their civic duty, paying their fair share of taxes. Tax loopholes were closed and privileges revoked. As a result, Justinian now had the money to focus on his grand designs for the empire. On the other hand, John also gave much of the money to people he thought deserved it. Most of all, himself. Big surprise. So, not surprisingly, the aristocrats absolutely hated him. Due to his other very questionable activities, he became the most hated man in the empire. One of these things that's too graphic to even describe here, but at the end of the day, he met the emperor's demands and did his job. And he did it very well. Another one of these new talents was the massive-brained Tribonian. IQ off the charts. One of the greatest jurists and lawgivers in all of history. See, the existing Roman law codes were unclear, antiquated, and overlapping. It was more just a bundle of random imperial edicts and responses by random emperors to individual problems and requests over hundreds of years. Justinian, a considerable scholar himself, had long contemplated this superhuman undertaking, and in Tribonian he found a man capable of bringing it to fruition. Thus, 6 months after his accession, he appointed a commission with Tribonian at its head, which was tasked with the codification of Roman law. They worked at an unbelievable speed, and a bit over a year later, the Codex Justinianus became the supreme authority of every court in the empire. Tribonian and the commission then started to
Yeah, right there. This is the thing that is being carried over today.
compile a fuller version, including Justinian's own laws, which was completed just a few years later. This time, they even included the writings of all the ancient Roman jurists. This was known as the Digest, or the Pandects. In it, they packed 3 million verses worth of wisdom into 150,000. Justinian even had it translated into Greek, so there'd be no excuse not to understand it. Moreover, in these new laws, they cracked down on heretics, removing all civil rights for the non-believers. Finally, the Institutes was published, which was a textbook of the 2 main law codes to be used in law schools. These were finally compiled into the Corpus Juris Civilis, the basis of every single law code in Western civilization up to the present day, cementing Justinian's legacy as the sublime lawgiver and Tribonian's legacy as one of the greatest legal minds to ever live. At this point, for one reason or another, Procopius and other aristocrats were seething that a man truly worthy of being emperor got the job, instead of some ass clown who used daddy's money and clout. Even more foreboding was the state of the demes. Remember how Justinian helped out the blues on occasion? Yeah, well, he used to do that by using the gaping loopholes in the dogshit legal system beforehand. Now armed with his new codex, Justinian sought to apply the law equally, and he did just that after the blues started spurging out. Now the blues were kinda pissed at him and the greens still held a grudge. One day as a bunch of thieves were being executed, 2 of them got away, 1 green and 1 blue. They were rescued by some monks and
That's what happens when you have an empire and you give political power to other teams too. I mean, if you want to be a proper emperor across other competitions, I guess, you can't have teams like that.
monastery, where the city prefect decided to starve them into submission. Since the 2 guys were from both demes, this became the common cause. During the chariot races at the Hippodrome, mobs of greens and blues started yelling at Justinian to pardon them. He waved them off, because after all, he was now dispensing justice equal-handedly. Then some of the crowd chimped out and started screeching the N-word. Yep, you heard that right. They chanted Nika, Nika over and over towards the Imperial box. Where there's one retard, there's always more. And soon enough, the entire fucking stadium erupted. Usually the blues and greens shouted at each other. This time they were shouting with each other at Justinian. In the infinite wisdom and judgment the average citizen is capable of, they set fire to the palace of the city prefect, essentially the police headquarters and the jail. But, you know, fire kinda tends to spread. Ultimately, half the city was burned down and some of the greatest buildings went up in flames. The Senate House, the old Hagia Sophia, the Hagia Irene, the massive baths of Zeuxippus, which were adorned by Constantine himself. Some of those scheming aristocrats started throwing money around and joined the riot, and sought to turn it into a revolt against the emperor himself, getting the plebs to demand the removal of John the Cappadocian and Tribonian. Justinian agreed, being seriously
What the hell does Nika mean to anyway?
alarmed. Then, in his infinite mercy, he even appeared in the Hippodrome and offered a general amnesty so long as the crowds go home. But you know how the masses work. Instead, the plebs and some scheming senators dragged Hypatius out of his house, outright proclaiming him as emperor. Remember, this was one of the couch guys and had a legit claim to the throne. Now it had been engineered into a full-blown attempt at overthrowing Justinian. With a chimp out at the palace gates, Justinian's situation was desperate, and he really wanted to avoid bloodshed. He ordered the boats to be loaded. It seemed like his ambitious reign was about to come to an inglorious end. It seemed destiny would have him idly watch as Nova Roma burned to the ground.
Nope.
He would let the empire once again fall into the hands of corrupt plutocrats and rioting plebs, and give up his divine mandate to rule in fear, ultimately being forgotten to the sands of time as a failure who capitulated to the forces of evil. However, right then and there, Theodora reminded him of his grand ambitions and his right to rule the empire given by God himself. In a fiery speech, she told Justinian, "May I myself never willingly shed my imperial robes, nor see the day when I am no longer addressed by my title." She infamously proclaims for everyone in the room, "The royal purple makes a fine burial shroud." That line started a flame inside of him that would never die out.
Damn.
Luckily, 2 of his best generals were in the room. Our hero from Dora, Belisarius, and that Mundus fella from earlier. With his newfound resolve, he ordered them against the mob. While the crowd was gathered on the Hippodrome floor, Belisarius slipped out of the palace with his imperial troops, and Mundus with a sizable force of Scandinavian mercenaries he happened to have with him. Meanwhile, the commander of the imperial bodyguards, an Armenian eunuch named Narcissus, stationed his men at all the exits of the Hippodrome. Belisarius and Mundus surrounded the Hippodrome with their soldiers. On the signal, every single one of these traitors were to be cut down. No mercy was to be given. The whole world was going to see what happens to those who betray the emperor.
Dab slowly. Oh god, this is so good. This episode was too good, man. Seriously, people, if you haven't subscribed, go to the original page. There's a link in the description and subscribe to this channel. Malthus is really good. This is going to be a big channel pretty soon, I'm sure of it. This was really high quality video, man. And yeah, this was better than the Doherty's video. Even I can see that. Ah, this was so epic. I find that blues and greens, crushed. That was about right, because you can't have two political parties like that. I mean, they will challenge you and your power. You can't have two powers or three powers at the time. You have to be a sole power, otherwise your authority gets challenged. This was a great video. I loved it. Alright, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my other reaction that I did. There's a link in the description for all of my other videos. Check out the playlist I created for Unbiased History. I think I'm gonna create a playlist for this one too pretty soon. It's just 2 videos right now, so I'm not gonna create it now. But yeah, I already reacted to the first part. This was the second part. I cannot wait for the next one. This was so good.